Hey guys, this is Sports with Dylan. It is my 1 year anniversary as a YouTube channel. This is just crazy. It's crazy how fast 1 year can fly by. And I would say my content's improved quite a bit. It's quite fun doing this, and I've learned a lot about editing during this process. And also about how to film myself. For example, not doing this like I did in my first video the whole time. And I've got more content coming for you guys in the next year, and better content. I'm working with better editing than you'll ever have seen before on this channel. So just mark my words. And you'll see new achievements by Sports with Dylan. For example, the fact that I just made my longest intro ever. Like I said, I have some fairly large changes coming for you guys in the next year. But for now, I'd like to talk about the present. The NHL and NBA playoffs are both going on right now. And I don't tend to just talk about news. I don't tend to talk about how the games work as much. But I figure I have to right now, just because it's peak time for both those leagues. So, gonna start with the NBA there. It's been a very interesting playoffs, but not shocking. All in all, there are a couple upsets, but no one from the bottom came up top, if you know what I mean. It wasn't that there's a huge upset, or a team upset multiple really good teams. But it's still been quite an interesting playoff. So now, you have the Warriors versus the Celtics, which is interesting because they both have some very good young players on the roster. Mainly Jordan Poole and Jason Tatum. So it's very interesting to watch those guys play, and it will be very fascinating to see how they play against each other. Now on to NHL. These playoffs have been really fun, I gotta say. Mainly because my favorite team, whose hat I'm not currently wearing, I realized, are making it very far. So we had a Battle of Alberta in the second round of the playoffs. And that was just such a great thing to have. We haven't had those teams meet up in the playoffs for years, so it was so fun to watch them meet. Although the series was not as close as I expected it to be. The Oilers won in 5 games after getting blown out in the first game. They just couldn't pull it together. Then the next 4 games they won. Now it was a bit controversial, game 5, because there was a goal that personally, even I think, shouldn't have been called back. But it was called back, and then the game went into overtime. Because of that, the Flames scored the goal, but then it had to go into overtime, and then the Oilers scored in overtime. So it means that if that goal hadn't been called back, then the Flames would have likely won that game. As an Oilers fan, I'm really hoping that's what happens for this next series. Because last night, the Colorado Avalanche kicked the Oilers' butts. And it seemed very similar to the first game against the Flames. So I'm hoping the Oilers can win the next 4 games. But it's a bit of a tougher challenge, given that the Avalanche are the best team in the league. But the Oilers have finally been on fire in the playoffs like they've needed to be. They were never that great. Something just couldn't click until now. McDavid, especially through the Kings series, and all through this, has been on fire. Absolutely amazing. Draisaitl was kind of quiet in the first series, the Kings. But then, against the Flames, he has erupted as well. And then you've also got Ryan Nugent-Hopkins playing very well, Evander Kane kicking butt, and Zach Hyman scoring goals when he needs to. So, your team is playing pretty solidly. My one concern is goaltending, and you've heard this before about the Oilers, I'm sure. Because their goalies, more specifically Mike Smith, keeps having these bad games. He was fine throughout the Flames series, except for game 1. He just sucked. And same thing for this past Avalanche game. And the whole Kings series, he was fine, but wasn't great. So that worries me. While the Avalanche, we all know, are a strong team. They have some great players with Nazem Kadri, Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, Gabriel Landeskog. The list goes on. Plus, they actually have a goalie in Darcy Kemper. But he was injured last night, which is very interesting. We'll see what becomes of that injury. Now, what I think was the most fascinating thing about the Battle of Alberta was the fact that Markstrom was not playing very well at all. I mean, the series before that they had against the Stars, he was the second best goalie in the playoff after only Jake Oettinger, the Stars goalie. But now, against the Oilers, he just couldn't. Mike Smith outplayed Markstrom, in short. That should tell you everything you need to know. So, I don't know what happened to Markstrom. Maybe he's injured or something, but we haven't heard anything about an injury. So it's just odd that he just got extinguished, pretty much. Now, I haven't really talked about the East yet, I'm realizing. So why not switch over to that? The Rangers have somehow made it to the conference final to play the Lightning, which is interesting because both series that they won went to Game 7, and then they only won likely because players on the opposing teams got injured. So, bit surprising they've made it this far. Gotta say, Igor Shesterkin has carried them all the way through this whole season. And he has just been playing lights out. He's been outplaying Andrei Vasilevsky, who they're about to play. But there's one slight issue. The fact that Victor Hedman, Nikita Kucherov, Steven Stamkos, amongst so many others, are on the Lightning. Also, Braden Point, if you're wondering why I forgot him, it's because he's out injured and has been for most of the season. But he's another star player. The Lightning seem unstoppable. And they have won 2 back-to-back Stanley Cups in the past 2 years. So I sincerely hope they do not win a third. That would be crazy for them. But I gotta admit, they have a really good core. Great job on Steve Yzerman, who's now the Detroit GM. But he's the one that built this team. Great for him all around. So that's pretty much all I've got to say today. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next year. Well, I'm not actually going to see you next year, because I'll be making videos between then and now, obviously. But you know what I mean.